It wasn't anticipated. All right, let's get started because we're already a little bit late, and I know that a group of you has to leave at 4:30. So we want to make sure that at least you get the most of it. Thanks a lot for coming. Thanks a lot for filling the room. It's nice, and I think it's a very good welcome for our guests who are coming from outside Antwerp and visiting today for this session. So my name is Tommaso. I'm a research professor at the Faculty of Law and Political Development Policy, and I teach a course in the LLM that is called Law in Ecological Crisis, where we already discussed the potential role of litigating climate change as a space of intervention, transformation, and what the limits and opportunities of relying on the legal systems are. And so I thought that would have been a very valuable opportunity for all of us to bring together in the same room representative of two legal cases that are currently ongoing in Belgium that have a lot of similarities, but also a lot of differences in terms of the legal reasoning behind it, the actors that are involved, and the defendant, and so on and so forth. So my role today was just to welcome you and also to thank Talia for opening up this session to your students. It's much appreciated. And just leaving the floor to Rat from FIAN Belgium, which is an NGO that is specifically working on the right to food and the right to food, which will be the chair and moderator for the day. The idea is to have as much time as possible for question and answers. So also all the ideas that you have that you want to share, I think it's going to be a very good opportunity today. So thanks a lot again to all of you who are on this side of the room, and even more to all of you who are on the other side of the room. And I really look forward to hearing and learning from all of you.
Thank you, Tommaso, and thank you for the organization of this event. I think I wanted to give a round of applause, but it's leaving the room. So let's get to it, I guess. Welcome to this session on litigating climate change. Why is Belgium at the forefront? I think we would start with a little video, but before we do so, allow me to ask them to introduce themselves, the four people that are here today with us. And so I think, can I just start with you, Celine? Yeah. Can you just explain this, who you are and why are you here today with us?
Yes, so I'm Hugues Falys. I'm a professor in constitutional law at Ligue, teaching fundamental rights. And I am also one of the co-founders of the Human Rights Law Clinic in Ligue. And I'm also, besides that, General Secretary of the Ligue des droits humains, the French-speaking side of the Human Rights League. And we decided to lead the FIAN case. It's been now 4 years that we are working on it in the Human Rights League. And I've been also working on climate mitigation with my students at Ligue in the legal field. And also a little bit, but with another hat as a researcher on climate change, federalism, and Belgian constitution. So that's why I'm here. And thanks a lot for the organization to my services back. With that,
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. I'm Koen. I'm a farmer not far from here. I might not look like a farmer. That's no coincidence because I'm not a farmer's son. So I decided to become a farmer 10 years ago. I'm running this farm, which is a CSA farm, community supported agriculture. And I grow over 70 varieties of vegetables on 1.5 hectares, also in a greenhouse. And I distribute them, I sell them within 10 kilometers around my farm, also in town in Antwerp. That's probably all you need to know to start right now.
So hi everyone, it's Sarah. I'm the coordinator of the NGO Klimaatzaak, which is Dutch for climate change. I'm a nurse and I'm also a lawyer. I have been working on the policy side for a long time. I was working for the governments for a long time, and then I saw like things were just not moving fast enough, and then I decided to change, to switch sides, and I started working for the NGO and actually suing my former employer. And thank you so much, Thomas, for organizing this and for inviting me as well. I think I'm always very motivated to explain this to young people, because we all know like climate change is mostly going to affect young people and even the unborn generation, and this is all happening on our watch. So I think we explain that we owe you some explanation on what's been going on and what we are trying to do with remedy.
I'm a lawyer. I worked with more than 15 years in the same law firm. It's called Progress Lawyers Network, and it's a law firm that tries to use the law to change the world, to make it a better place. So actually, we try to do a lot of strategic litigation and do it to support social movements. So we work a lot for the unions, we work a lot for all kinds of organizations. Like this week, we introduced a case against the new rules for child care in Flanders. And that's a decree that excludes everybody that isn't already privileged. So, and we do this for like 20 organizations, so actually 20 organizations. These kind of cases, we like to do them because we think that they have a real impact. Or have a real impact on the movements, but also we try to make structural changes with them. And that's why we're so very happy in our office. We are 4 lawyers working on this case. We think this case might be one of the biggest cases concerned about or having the biggest impacts.
Thank you, everyone. There's a video that I would like to share with you. Is it on the website? Yeah. I was asking if the video was on the website. Yeah, the video was website.
But it's also in my blog post if you want.
If it's in the PowerPoint, there.
But
Or you can figure out. This one now. You know what it is on the website, I think.
I think that's yeah.
Very strategic to show you the entire website before we continue. Yeah, but
It's all working. Oh, yeah. The front part is just in Google and go to family video and you find
that's what I thought.
Yep.
Suite production de presse, dans le vignoble, ça revêche, on oublie intégralement par les productions de beurre. Et tout ça en lien avec le climat, qui décide de beaucoup de choses. Et quand le climat ne va pas, c'est nous qui ne va pas. J'ai décidé de poursuivre TotalEnergies parce que je considère qu'ils ont une très grande responsabilité dans le dérèglement climatique. Et concrètement, en 2018-2022, les pays ont réellement été aussi les pratiquement les racines de l'herbe. Il a fallu acheter du fourrage et il y a même parfois fallu vendre des animaux pour diminuer cette fête pour arriver à passer l'hiver, simplement. Avant de réduire le secteur pour s'adapter au dérèglement, il y avait une soixantaine de mers. Aujourd'hui, il en reste 35. Selon le point, c'est la plus maîtresse de l'exploitation. On a récolté 4 mois de mai ce printemps. Ça fait honorer les animaux comme ils sont dans les étages. Évidemment, à la bonne saison, les animaux se nourrissent dans les prairies directement. Mais en année climatique difficile, c'est évident que c'est là qu'on voit la grosse différence, c'est qu'on en produit beaucoup moins, mais qu'on est d'en acheter à l'extérieur pour nourrir le cheptel. Le métier d'agriculteur est tellement lié au climat, et là on constate quand même dans la succession des saisons que ça devient de plus en plus extrême et compliqué, avec des périodes très longues de sécheresse et des périodes très longues de pluie qui nous compliquent vraiment la tâche. Les dérèglements climatiques sur mon exploitation, c'est aussi un stress de ne pas savoir de quoi demain sera fait, un stress au niveau de l'organisation du travail. On ne peut pas semer à des périodes où il faudrait semer, on ne peut pas récolter à des périodes où il faudrait récolter. Cette inquiétude par rapport aux dérèglements climatiques, elle est générale dans la profession, dans le monde agricole. Tout le monde est conscient qu'on est occupé de vivre un grand changement. On se pose la question, si ça continue, si ça empire, qu'est-ce qu'on va faire?
Pour la première fois en Belgique, un citoyen et 3 associations poursuivent en justice une multinationale pour sa responsabilité dans le dérèglement climatique. Pour défier que le géant des énergies fossiles, lui, a besoin de vous. Nous avons besoin de vous. Ensemble, mettons TotalEnergies face à sa responsabilité.
Maybe let's firstly turn to the farmer in this panel. What does this video do with you? How do you find yourself? Like, can you find yourself in this story? Like, what is the thing that speaks out to you?
Yes, of course, this is the daily reality we face as farmers. The truth is, I used to watch these videos as being in your place, as the people who are going to eat this food and are maybe a bit concerned about what happens to farmers, but this is not his problem, this is our problem. And so now I feel like I'm on both sides, so I'm worried about what am I going to eat within this many years, and how am I going to pay my debts, and how am I going to earn some money, how am I going to keep my enterprise rolling day after day. I've been farming for 7 seasons now, for 7 years, and I have only had extreme conditions. In 2018, which was my first year of farming, I had no rain from May till the end of August, half of August. And then in 2019, I think there were 3 heat waves in one summer. In 2020, it stopped raining half June and started again in half September. 2021 was extremely wet, so we could do nothing on the field. We just couldn't sow, we couldn't plant, we couldn't control our weeds, which we do mechanically, because I didn't mention I'm an organic farmer, so we control our weeds mechanically, and you need some rainless days for the weeds to die off. And then 2022 was the earliest heat wave we ever had in June, and the latest heat wave we ever had in September. And then 2022, 23, which you will all remember, was again as wet as hell. So, and then you have these winters which become wetter and wetter, and we don't get enough frost for the health of some plants, and for the dying off of some pests during winter. So what I see is that we get stuck in these weather conditions for weeks. Where in Belgium we had this moderate climate of of very various weather conditions, in which we had the time to sow, the time to plant, the time to wait, and then it would rain, and then the crops would get water. And now we get into this weather type, and we stay in it for 8 weeks, 9 weeks, sometimes 3 months, in which nothing changes. It keeps on raining for that period, or it doesn't rain for that long, which is completely unworkable for a farmer to get his crops in the ground in time. I know there are farmers now who haven't been able to sow their wheat, who haven't been able to sow their beets, their fodder beets, and it's too late by now. So they are not gonna have fodder beets this year. Maybe they were gonna sell them to someone else, and this is an income which completely falls away. Maybe they were gonna feed it to their own animals, and now they're gonna have to buy them. But who is gonna have them if no one in Belgium has been able to sow their beets? So this is really very a clear and present danger for our enterprises. And what I learned and thought about and read about when I started to farm is that organic agriculture and permaculture and regenerative agriculture had measures that could help us adapt to climate change, and they are mostly depicted as miracle solutions, but they have their limits, and that's what I see. I do regenerative agriculture. I do no-till agriculture. I use my soil as I turn them into a sponge instead of a soap. A sieve. So that when it rains, it captures the rain and it loses it steadily once the drought sets in. Instead of losing all the rain and getting rid of all the water when it falls. But this has its limits. When I want to sow, I have to clear my bed, my vegetable bed from weeds, and this needs drought. So I need to die off to make all the weeds die off. And then I have this arid, dry soil in which I can sow. But if it doesn't rain for 4, 5, 6 weeks afterwards, then nothing grows. The seed doesn't germinate. This has its limits, so we can adapt as much as we can. We can plant trees on our fields, which is not evident. And I have the benefit of not being a farmer's son and starting with a clean sheet, but farmer sons who inherit their farms from their father with all the debts and all the stables which haven't been paid back to the banks. They can't just turn around their whole way of farming in order to adapt to climate change. So it has its limits. We know what is facing us. On top of that is the ironicity that Belgium has by one of the most fertile soils of the world, combined with this used to be moderate climate. We do a lot of exporting because of that. I hear now farmers and policymakers of the Mediterranean saying it's getting too dry and too hot here. We are now exporting our vegetables to northwestern Europe in winter, and we all eat our broccoli and our cauliflower in winter from Murcia and from south of Italy. But they're not going to be able to keep on delivering them, and it's going to turn the other way around. So we are going to have to produce for the south of Europe within this and who knows 10, 15 or 20 years. But we are facing the same problems here, and we also have to ask ourselves, are we going to be able to feed ourselves in the first place? And are we going to keep on exporting what we try to produce here with that amount of difficulties?
Thank you very much. I think this was at least a very nice introduction to the group as to why farming is clearly impacted by climate change. I think, thank you for your personal testimony as well. I would like to ask Mieke to shortly introduce us to the farmer case itself. And for this, Mieke is going to use a PowerPoint.
Yeah, okay, you can flip it very.
I can flip it very quickly, okay.
Okay, very good, because, yeah, they told me I have 7 minutes and there are like 17 slides, so it's going to be very, but some of the points are a bit more complicated. So first of all, we are going to challenge TotalEnergies, that's a capital major, and that's very important because there has been Klimaatzaak, which is of course the most important case that has been done in Belgium about climate, but there is something very unjust in the way that climate issues are addressed until now, and that is the real polluters, the ones that are really responsible for climate change, they are kept out of sight, and they can do whatever they want. And so the carbon majors, so companies that produce oil and gas and also cement, they cause climate change for a very, very big amount. I think it's 80% of human climate change is caused by 57 oil, gas, and cement producers. So actually, we wanted to target one of the main responsible companies for this. And then, yeah, actually, the people who organized the case, I'm just a humble lawyer. I'm going to present the case in court with my colleagues. The case starts with a farmer, with Hugues, and you already saw the film, so I'm not going to talk further about it, but you saw that he has some damages because of this. But what we try to do is we try to obtain recognition for the damages that he has. We want to force TotalEnergies to move away from fossil fuels, and we want to put an end to impunity of the fossil fuel industry. That's the main goal of the court case. And then there is the question, why would we go to court for that? We can ask nicely, we can ask the government, maybe we have to have more corporate responsibility, laws, etc. But all of this has been done. It has been done by organizations, by human rights organizations, environmental organizations, etc. But there is actually the necessity to challenge climate change is growing, and what's actually being done is not there. So there is a very big urgency to address this problem. So let's go further. Yeah. Then so we started with the farmer, but in the case are also 3 organizations. There is Greenpeace, there is the Ligue, and there is FIAN. And these organizations are there. That's a very important point. Why? This is like a classical responsibility case. There is a person who has damages. He asked for the responsible who caused the damages to pay for it. But actually, the organizations are saying that there is a bigger problem because not only is touched, but human rights are touched because people who are poor, they are more touched by climate change because they live in houses that aren't isolated. They have less access to medical care, and so they suffer more from, for example, because there are so many things in which human rights are touched by climate change. The same thing for food sustainability, and then the environment. I don't even have to explain, but it's very important that this case is also put forward by these organizations because it shows that the problem is really very big. It's not a problem for the farmers. It's not a problem just for the environment. It's a problem of all. So what else? Then maybe about more, well, why targets TotalEnergies, but that's, I think it's very clear, it's one of the carbon majors. They have two big plants in Belgium. A lot of the people in Belgium are paying every month to TotalEnergies because it's one of the biggest electricity companies in Belgium. TotalEnergies is also a very big company, so if they want, they can change their policy. They can go away from fossil fuels and they can invest in better ways of energy providing. So that's why, and then more to the detailed aspects of the case. So I already told you it's a classical liability case, and you all know the article 1382. It's unfortunately it's going to change, but this is one of the main articles that every first year law students knows, and that's what we're going to use. So well, there are three criteria. As you know, there has to be a fault. Somebody has to have made a fault. And because of this fault, there has to be damage. And then the damage, between the damage and the fault, there has to be a legal causal connection. And when you have these three aspects, then the responsible has to pay for the damage. So we think in this case, we have these three aspects, although it's not going to be easy. So first of all, the fault, no, first of all, the damage. So the damage of, there are two damages, there's the damage of and there is the damage of the end use. So for Luke, we have, of course, what he all explains, but we are going to demonstrate, or we are going to try to demonstrate that some of the extreme weather events cause damage in his crops and in his work, etc. So we have a thunderstorm in 2018, and it was a very big thunderstorm that stayed for half an hour on top of his field. So there was a lot of rain pouring, and we had some recordings of this, and he had some strawberry fields, not forever, but the strawberries were all destroyed because of this thunderstorm. Then the year after, no, 2 years after, there was a heat wave. 2 years after, there was another heat wave, and 2 years after that, there was another heat wave. And all of the heat waves, they go together with drought. And so it was very hot and it was very dry. And so he had his cows who didn't get enough food because the grass was too dry, it wasn't growing. And he had to dry it and he had to bring it to the cows. So there was more, and there were more expenses. So that's the damage of food. Now it's very difficult to calculate this damage for several reasons, but that's a technicality that we have to try to overcome. Then we have the damage of the NGOs, the organizations, and that's about the human rights. So we are going to detail which human rights are impacted by climate change, the environmental damage, and the damage for its insecurity. Then, more interesting, there is the fault of TotalEnergies. That's a very important point, and they will try to convince us that they didn't make any mistakes. But so what will we show? We will try to demonstrate that there was a breach of the duty of care, and there might be some people who have heard of the duty of care in relation to the Shell case. So the duty of care is actually like a general obligation of everybody. You have to make sure that you do the things in a good way, particularly the huisvader. But also there is a breach, a violation of the Paris Agreement, of the scientific agreements to stay under the 1.5 degrees of temperature augmentation. And then lastly, there are, of course, human rights violations. Then we think that there are several aspects of the mistake, of the fault of TotalEnergies. So first of all, there is the emission of greenhouse gases. So while producing oil and gas, etc., they emit a lot of greenhouse gases. But secondly, they also, it's important to say that since the 70s, since 1970, TotalEnergies knows that because of their activities, temperature is rising. They know this. They know they are a part of climate change. They also know that climate change is bad for humanity. They know this since the year 70. They made a report themselves where they recognize. But since that day, they try to convince politicians and everybody that's in charge or has power that this is not true. That actually climate change is something normal, that sometimes climate goes up and sometimes goes down. Because we know in medieval times there was like a very cold period, and now we are a very hot period, and it has nothing to do with greenhouse gases. So they put all machinery to work to convince people that this is the truth, and that's what they actually know is the truth. So we call it dissemination and lies, but also lobbying. And we have some evidence of this, but this is one of the most important parts, I think, of the case, because between 1970 and now, there are years and 50 years, they could do what they wanted because of their lies. And then there is also the greenwashing. We know this, they change their site, they have a whole website full of information that isn't correct. And then there is, on the other hand, the absence of a real transition strategy. So they say, yeah, that we don't really, we do a lot, but actually they don't do it. Then the third component of the liability case is, of course, the causal connection. And then, well, the theory said that the one who causes the damage, or even a part of the damage, has to repair it. And that's important because, of course, the TotalEnergies will say, yes, but if we don't cause the damage, somebody else will. Or we are only a very small part of the damage, because of course there are 57 companies that cause 80% of the damage. So mathematics, the 0.6 for them. So it's a very small amount. But in Belgian liability law, even a very small amount of the fault can lead to full reparation. So then.
Can you wrap it up?
Yes, but I'm at the end actually.
Yes.
So there itself, but maybe to say we have the causal connection in two steps. So first of all, the link between the damage of food and the climate change is evident. Then between climate change and the mistakes of energy, that's going to be a little bit more difficult because, of course, they're not saying they other people, and not just them, but absolutely not them. And then the last thing I want to say, because we don't ask only reparation for the damage of you, we also want TotalEnergies to change their policy for the future. So what do we want? We want that they stop all investments in new fossil fuel projects, because they're all over the world. They are still looking for new places to explore and still having new projects. So we want this to stop. We want to do a reduction in emissions, and we want a reduction in oil and gas productions, and then we see the amounts we want. Yeah, actually, for 2050, we want minus 90% and minus for oil and 85% for gas. This is really realistic. We think this is important to do it because there is not enough investment in green energy because of the fact that people keep investing in oil and gas. So in order to have green energy, we have to stop the fossil fuels. it's very important that we have this. So with your request of injunctions, maybe legally, this is completely possible to, if we get proof that there will be damage in the future, if they don't improve. So I think that's the end.
Yes, thank you, very interesting. And maybe we'll make more space for more technical questions, the ones that you find the most interesting. So let's first present the case and then see what we want to focus on as a group. Maybe, Sarah, you could do the same for the Klimaatzaak. Would you also like to do some visuals?
Well, maybe we can swap places so I can just.
Yeah, as you wish. Yes.
So, yeah. As said, we did a case, we're still doing a case against the 4 governments who are responsible for climate change, I think, for climate policy. I think, first of all, I want to stress, certainly in this audience, I mean, if we're talking about climate, it's all like doom and gloom, and we know we are heading to like a 3 degrees world as we're looking at policies now. But it's important to remember, like, future is still unwritten and everything is still possible. I mean, it's all about the choices we make today are gonna influence the climate tomorrow. We know all the solutions are there. It's all about the choices and the choices of the political leaders, of course, and also the regulation of these huge multinationals who are ruining the planet for us. But everything is still possible. And I think that's really important to keep in mind. And I think the 2 cases we are presenting today is like all about influencing the choices that are unfortunately not made spontaneously today. So the climate case, maybe just quickly saying that it was all an initiative. It was just a couple of friends coming together. Like, there was no big scheme, big plan when we started with the climate case. I was not present when they started. It started in 2014. But it was just a group of friends like you and me coming together, thinking, brainstorming, like, what answer can we give to this climate crisis that we see evolving in front of our eyes. And then this group decided to invite Roger Cox, who is in the climate litigation ecosystem, is a really big name. He's the one who did like the first climate case against the Dutch government, and we won this case in the Netherlands in 2015. And we saw what was happening there, and then this group of non-legal friends decided, okay, we'll try to do the same in Belgium. The fact that they were not legal experts proved to be important because they didn't think about the fact that litigating in Belgium is a lot harder because we had to like litigate against 4 governments, whilst in the Netherlands they only had to do it against one, like the central Dutch government. Quickly going over the parties of the procedure, the course of the proceedings, the 2 verdicts we had, and then like an outlook on what's next. So we started the proceedings, the formal proceedings in 2015 with the NGO, and then 8,429 citizens joined us already. And we proceeded against the 4 governments, like I said, the 3 regions and the Belgian federal states. And in July 2019, more than 50,000 citizens joined the case, which makes us the biggest climate case worldwide. So we consider ourselves really like a people against the state case, a grassroots movement. The citizens, it are really the citizens who are making this all possible. Those are the ones who are supporting us morally, but also legally. They legally joined the case as co-plaintiffs. And they also support us financially because we don't get subsidies, which might sound logical. And it are the citizens that are keeping us upright and have been keeping us upright all this time. In the course of the proceedings,
we started with a super big backset. So in 2015, the Flemish government decided to introduce like a procedural incident, saying they didn't want to do the proceedings in French, they wanted to do it in Dutch. But there is this ancient law about the use of language in legal proceedings, and it was clear that we had to do it in French. We were all Flemish people, so for us it would have been much better to do it in Flemish as well, but we had to do it in French. But the Flemish government took us all the way to the Supreme Court, so it took us 3 years to get a decision on the language of the proceeding, which was super frustrating because we introduced the case saying it's super urgent to do something about this climate, and climate policy has to change. And they took us, I mean, on a ride of 3 years talking about the language instead of climate policy. So in 2018, finally, the Supreme Court said, like, okay, of course, you have to do it in French. And so it was only in 2018 that we could start the proceedings on the substance. We always asked for a panel of 3 judges to decide on the case, because these are cases that are, I don't underestimate the pressure on judges. And this is a super big decision also for a judge to take, a big responsibility. You're like putting a whole society on a track of transition, a big transition. So it's really difficult. So we asked for 3 judges. We also were granted the panel of 3 judges, both in first instance and in appeal. And so the way these cases go, you first have these rounds of written conclusions, and then we get to plead. We had a lot of pleading sessions, both in first instance as in appeal. And we got our first instance verdict in June 21. We won, but we appealed anyway, and I'll explain later why. So we appealed, and then we had our appeal verdict in November last year. But then, since this is a never-ending marathon, this case, the Flemish government decided to appeal again, and they are taking us to the Supreme Court, and that was formally decided last month. So the first instance verdict, the judges decided there was a breach of the civil code. So what Mika explained, we're using the same article. So that's like the extra contractual liability we all have towards each other. And also the human rights, so Article 2 and 8 of the European Convention of Human Rights. So like a massive breach of human rights of its own population, which is really, it was never, it was really a first in Belgium. We always tend to like link human rights violations with faraway countries. It has nothing to do with Belgium. And that was decided like almost 60,000 citizens, their human rights were violated because of the negligent climate policy of our governments. But what the first instance judges didn't dare to do, maybe, they didn't impose reduction targets. So they didn't give us a revenue. They didn't say to the government, so now you have to change course, now you have to like really speed up your climate policy, be much more ambitious than you were up till now. And in a normal country, actually, you would say it's not necessary. I mean, it was decided there was a breach of human rights. I mean, you would think like the politicians would say, okay, for sure, now we have to change everything because this is not what we want to do. But there was almost no political response, which is troubling. Like much, it's troubling. Way past our own court case. It's very troubling from a rule of law perspective. But for us, it meant like, okay, we didn't do it to get like this symbolic victory. I mean, this is nice for like the law books, but it's not changing anything on the terrain. So we thought about it long and hard, and then we decided, despite this victory, we're going to appeal anyway to our own. So then we had to do the whole appeal proceedings. What we're asking basically in appeal, and maybe if we have time, I can go into the science of it later, but what we are asking is for Belgium to take up its minimal, really like minimal share of responsibility in combating climate change. So prevent a warming that's higher than 1.5. And so we are using a lot of science for that. And what we asked, so the injunction, the thing we wanted to get imposed upon the governments was this 61 reduction of greenhouse gas emissions by 2030. And again, we use the two legal pillars, European Convention and Civil Codes. We got our verdict in November last year. The judges followed the biggest part of our reasoning, but didn't impose a 61%. They imposed 55%. I'm not going to explain it now, maybe later, but they did. The interesting part is that they really like followed the whole reasoning of the scientists, where they derived a national budget of the global budget, which is it's not so easy for judges to go that deep into the science, but they did it anyway. And a 55% reduction is still much more than they would do now. They didn't. Wallonia was not convicted because they already reached the minimum target for 2020, and they just in time set a reduction target of 55% in their decree. So the judges didn't have anything to convict them for. So what's next? What's ahead? It's not going to be easy anyway. We have the verdict now, but that's not gonna like magically change everything. That's for sure. There was a big political backlash, mostly on the Flemish side. So the government, the minister, Zuhal, you might have heard of her, who is responsible for the climate policy in Belgium, in Flanders, immediately said she was going to appeal to the Supreme Court. And she said the implementing this reduction order will collectively impoverish the Flemish population, and we're not going to accept that. While there are studies of like consortia of universities and research centers that demonstrate that actually implementing the verdict is not only good for the climate, but it's like the most cost-optimal trajectory for Belgium to get to net zero in 2050. So what this minister is saying is not true at all, but it's really hard to like get that message out there, like for the broader public. And it would even be very beneficial for, according to, again, reports we didn't write, but we would get more employment. Employment would grow between 1% and 2%. And also our BNP would grow if we would implement the verdict. So that's the debate we're in now. We will have to go to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court will not like reassess the merits of the case. They will only check the legality of the decision that was taken by the appeal judges. But unfortunately, we will only have Supreme Court verdict in 2026. Meanwhile, they are legally obliged to implement the verdict. So we'll see what happens on that side. It's only Flanders that appeal to the Supreme Court. So for the federal state and the Brussels region, it's final, and they can't appeal it anymore. They have to do it. They can't challenge it anymore. And then maybe just one more thing that's important to say is that our judges were really smart and very creative. They created the possibility for us to go back to them, to the same courts in 2000. Well, whenever we have the intermediate results 2020 to 2024, and their new climate ambitions, which they have to like put in documents for the European Commission, we will be able to go back to them saying, okay, this is what they have been doing meanwhile, this is what they're planning to do. And if they're not on track, the courts might impose penalty payments, and they might be very considerable, just as an extra pressure to get them to implement the verdict. So that's what's still going on. And then one last slide. Yeah, we made a documentary. If you want to, we made a documentary together with Nick Balthazar, who is one of the co-founders. He's the director as well, and you can see it online. It's called Beauty of Purity.
Thank you very much, Sarah. Now, by a raise of hands, who in this room still knows Article 1382? Thank you, you make me feel very young. Let's close this maybe. So I would like to ask you a question, because we've now seen two cases. But what intrigued me in your presentation before, when you were introducing yourself, is that like you've been working on this for 4 years, right? So my question immediately is like, what does it take? Like, what are the elements that are necessary for a group of, let's call them legal activists, or to start a case like this?
Okay. So, it's true that it's been a while that we are working on it, and I will make it clear. So I'm working on it for the Human Rights League as a volunteer, as a legal activist, not as a constitutional law. So because it's not constitutional law at all. So what we discovered that we need a lot of legal expertise. Legal expertise is key, and we already mentioned that, because it's really important to have lots of legal analysis. And for it, I will share with you one of the key points that took some time. It was the risk assessment, because like our target is not public authority. Public authority can be not as good students as you should expect in the way that they will not compel to the judgment, but our target can be suspected to be even less nice, if I can say so. And so we made some risk assessment when it comes to retortion measures and how we can prevent those risks, especially for Hugues, the farmer that is during the case. So that was one of the analysis, one of the resources that we needed. I don't know if you know SLAP study, strategic law, studies against public prosecution. So that's the kind of legal actions that are brought by big multinational companies when you raise awareness about their responsibility, for instance, in climate change. And we wanted to analyze the risks that exist with our case. So that was one of the examples. Another point that took some time that you need, and Sarah also explained it quite clearly, is that you need a lot of science. You need the judge and the contact players to go quite deeply into science. You need expertise to bring it before the judge. So it took some time. And so you need to build a platform, and that was one of our goals. It was not to make we started with a group of lawyers and with Hugues, so there was a meeting and between us, and that started the whole case. But we didn't want it to be like a technical, nice case for textbook. We wanted it to be also like a social movement, like something that would be that would be, that everyone could claim part of it. And for instance, it's fantastic that Koen is also on board, but then it took time to have everybody on board, speak with trade union, with the climate platform in Belgium, with other NGOs and so on. So this also is needed, but also it takes time. It makes sense, but it takes time. And it's also like today, for instance, we also realize that we really need in our risk assessment, one of the ways to mitigate risk, it was to have a public support. Because the more you have public support, the less slap would be a nice strategy. So it means that you have to have students with you, that you have to have other movements with you. So well, I could go on, but also you have to so another point is that you have to convince people inside NGOs that in case it was all the energy and the finance that is with us. For instance, the Human Rights League is a NGO that is specialized in strategic litigation on human rights, but not on climate litigation. So then you have to also a little bit change the culture inside the NGO to go on climate issues. I could go on, but maybe because in 4 years there's lots of work that has been done. But yeah.
So I hope everyone's taking note of what you need.
Yeah.
We're clearly grooming, that's not true. But so yeah, expertise, a platform, the science, all of it.
Also coordination, communication, because we are only with lawyers, and lawyers, we are not really good at communication. To communicate so you also need to think a lot about how to communicate, how to raise awareness about the narrative that you propose. So it's also a big deal.
Does any of the other panel members wants to add anything to this, or do you think this was, in terms of elements needed, basically everything that you've been working with as well?
I'm adding something, and I think you could agree, Sarah, that you need a lot of time, a lot of energy, because it's really, you have to think about everything, because the targets, in your case, the state or the 4 states, and then in our case, TotalEnergies, they're enormous, and you know that they're going to increase the budget, enormous budgets to counter or attack. So you need a lot of time and energy to do the legal work, to make the strongest case possible. It costs a lot of money. And what you want, if you want to create a social movement, I think it's a very good, those cases are very good to involve people, but you have to organize this. So doing the work of talking to the people, convincing them to join, to start a group, to support the case, to support the farmers, etc., organizing these kinds of events, it all takes a lot of time and energy, and so we actually need a lot of hands and a lot of minds to help us. So please join, contact us, contact the muscle, and we will be happy to give you some work.
Do not hesitate.
So there are plenty of questions that we can ask about maybe more the legal technicalities of each of the cases. I think we kind of bombarded you with interesting topics. Maybe before we get into the more like technical details of each of the cases, because we can explore some of the questions, we would like to hear from you. Are there any questions from the room to these panel members on a specific case or more in general? What struck you, what you want to have more dealing with? Then now is your opportunity to speak up. Please go ahead.
When I first got suing TotalEnergies and requesting them to stop oil gas, there are a lot of people are going to research about what's the reaction, what is the definition of energy that.
Okay, the answer? Okay, well, we all need energy, of course. So, if we don't use oil and gas anymore, we still need energy. And well, the most capable people of providing energy are the energy companies. They were doing research for renewables since years and years and years, and they're just waiting until subsidies from the state come to invest in them, because nobody forces them. But they have all this money. They're like the richest companies in the world. They need a lot of money. They can, if tomorrow they have to do only sustainable, they can. They have the money. And you know what they need to do this in order to do this? They need a lot of people working for them. So I didn't make the calculation, but I don't think you need less people to provide renewable energy to from oil. So I really think this is an issue. We don't want to kill corporations. We want to stop climate change. So, and I think one of the important things that Celine mentioned, that we contact with the unions, but yet you elaborate.
Yeah, that's a very good question, of course, because it raised the question of the just transition. And you are absolutely right to raise that question. But what's interesting, for instance, when it comes to TotalEnergies, is that from the side, it is contested. The strategy is contested by different categories of workers. And for instance, there has been a strike of mine in one of their sites, and they were asking clear strategic explanation about renewable energy. So they were not asking to go on with fossil fuels. They were asking, we need a clear planification of our work, and if we need some information for renewable energy. So the work that has been done, research work, is that renewable energy, when energy transition would give a lot of work. And just as Sarah said, it's a question of choice, political choice, a choice at the level of corporation. And unfortunately, it's not going in this direction. And the idea is to force them to go in another.
Yeah, if I can just add, I think it's also a matter of timing, you know, I mean, even if these big companies are not debating that we have to go to net zero and then everything has to change, they will also, at least in the public space, say that is necessary. But they just want to like solve climate action and turn into renewable as long as possible, because it can make a lot of profit in the meanwhile. But they know it's gonna happen anyway. So it's really a matter of, yeah, we have to make sure that these people who are working there now get retrained and get like proper new employment in another sector or in the sector.
And the idea really in the private case is not to say they are bad in itself. The idea is to make them, to force them to be real actors of the transition, because they have the means to do it. And food and also food, they are doing it. They are positive forces for the transition. And what we are asking is that companies like TotalEnergies also do participate in that movement. So that's also the idea.
That's very, very good one thing. We don't change anything. People like food and foods are going to lose their jobs. And we never talk about that. We only talk about the people who are going to be losing the job working with this climate change. And other people are already, and for the last decade, lost their jobs and their lives was coming to the climate change. And I think that you put that on the scale, even if it was 1 equal to 1, you will probably have a very different picture about like who's actually losing what now and who is losing what.
And for instance, when it comes to TotalEnergies, their new projects, fossil fuel new projects, they are already taking the jobs of so many farmers in Africa. So it's like really directly. So it's just
Yeah, my farm was also inflicted by another multinational in Ligue called FIAN for the PFAS story. So I'm very interested in what the force is going to do, the port of effort in the future. And there are talks with the unions of these factories in the port. And there is this slogan within the union saying no jobs on the plant. So they are aware of this, and they are going to have to struggle too in order to make their companies not go broke. It's a concern of everybody.
First of all, I'm sorry, I need to go after this announcement or question, call it if you want. Second, thank you for coming to announce this at the occupation. That's why I came here. I didn't know what was happening. It was really interesting. And third, I just want to stress that the occupation at the Agora is still going on for Gaza, for the academic boycott. You are all the future. I think you're mostly law students. I'm a journalism intern. All together, we need to do this. I don't know what your opinion is. I hope it's a certain opinion, but doesn't matter. So I'm sorry I need to go, but please come join us at the occupation. And sorry for taking my minutes. You also took your time at the occupation to announce this. So yeah. Bye bye.
I saw a lot of hands. Yeah, go ahead.
Wondering if you consider going against other companies or did you focus on Zero or for one reason?
I think for the moment, we will just focus on TotalEnergies because it's already a lot of work, but yeah.
So the strategy was to have first decision, thanks for it, and that's the thing. But the idea would be to go on if we need to. And but the idea, the general idea of the plan application movement is to put pressure on the company, and they are plan against Shell, against everybody, even other, brought by other NGOs, and we are in contact with them. So, but the idea would be to put the maximum pressure on for the. But so that, as Nick said, it's really demanding to establish the core of this specific company. So we could not put the 60 or the gas company all together.
Yeah, we know the defense of this about this orange Shell, the defense of Shell was yes, but we are only small parts. It's not our fault. It's a whole of the carbon base, and it's also important to point out beginning that you specifically. You did this, and you can change, but you don't do it. And the judge in Shell was the judge it was very clear about this. It's not because there are others who did this that you are not responsible. So it's also politically it's very important to show that every one of these companies personally is damaging.
I think we have similar defending in Turkey as well. Like governments tend to say like we're too small. Belgium thinks it's too small. We said like the job okay, maybe we should not pay taxes either. Yeah. That's right. And it's called gradually events, right? We're too small, so you should just talk to other countries, to other majors. I was very firmly tackled by the judges in all these cases. They all say like they could individually sign the UNESCO Triple T Convention on Climate. You individually promise to defend your citizens against dangerous climate change, and this is what you have to do, irrespective of what other countries are doing. So this is something you have to do. And I think work of the colleagues of the farmers is super important because it's also like tackling a gap in governance in a way, right? These companies are so big, they have more power than often have more power than individual countries. They're often richer than individual countries. And nobody seems to like be able to control them anymore. So
as a government, if you say like you have to change your policy, they say okay. At least they threaten, okay, but then we'll just move to another country where there's no regulations like the one you are imposing on us. So if judges there step up and say like, okay, if you're not gonna escape, you will have to leave and individually say to all of these companies. I mean, that's like adding another to the overall governance we have. Super important.
I think we add just another thing to that. I think that makes each other stronger because, well, in some way, our case, the farmer case, partial balances, there is the reply of Ligue who says yes, but I cannot do this because we are going to impoverish all of the Flemish people. But no, if you just focus on who is responsible for this and you target a bit more the multinationals that are really causing climate change, then the people are not impoverished. It's because of their policy. If they have to do it, well, they'll make sure that you cannot drive cars anymore and that you have to pay more taxes for, etc., etc. But no, if you focus better, then nobody has to be impoverished unless the people that are today.
Okay, there's a lot of subsidies going to like the industry, so it's not like, I mean, we're actively supporting them to do what they are doing. So I think last year 13 billion euros went into subsidy for these fossil fuels, which we urgently need to let go and imagine what we can do in supporting people who need support with 13 billion euro. I mean, it's a huge amount of money. So
I get €1,000 a year from subsidies to give you energy. Yes, go ahead.
I find it interesting to be modified by the farmers scheme and all, but on the other hand, I immediately thought about the farmers protest that took place 2 or 3 weeks ago, I think, where the farmers were protesting against the rules that the government and the EU government were placing upon the farmers to reduce the negative effects of the climate change. So I wanted to maybe ask Farmer Cohen about his opinion on this.
Okay, this is a question not easy to answer in 2 minutes, because this is not the only problem we are facing in agriculture. There are dozens of problems a farmer faces in order to keep his enterprise going. And the circumstances in which farmers have to farm economically and environmentally are completely impossible, in fact. So 40% of the European budget is going to farmers to keep them alive financially, because the food system doesn't work anymore. So in these circumstances where you have your customers, which are very big companies, which are multinational in many cases, and your providers, which are multinational and very big companies in many cases, and you're entangled in this crux with also all your debts with the big banks, and then a government on the fourth side, which is asking you to do a lot of things which don't seem to coordinate or seem to be compatible with the things the other three ask and demand you to do. And this is what gets them panicking. And that's what you saw in the picture. So this is pure panic. And they are trying to stay alive. They are doing what they were told to do the past decades by the government, by the banks, by their providers, and by their customers. And now everybody asks them to go the other way, to take a 180 or 180 degrees turn. So that they are just they don't know what to do. They don't know in which direction they're gonna go, and they think whole society is against them. Because yeah, everybody wants to eat and everybody wants cheap food, and they want to save the climate and they want to save the environment and biodiversity. And this all has to be done by farmers. So that's why they panic and they are getting angry and they are feeling, I think most of all, they're feeling left alone. Because our food production and our food security is a matter of all society. And it doesn't have to be suing Total, it should be society suing Total, because they're jeopardizing our food supply, our food security. One of these, the symptoms for this is that there used to be a disaster fund. So if there was a weather disaster in Belgium, farmers could say, okay, I have this damage on my field, and then the government would say, okay, this is a disaster, and then you can apply for funds in order to get a subsidy for your damage. But now the governments are deleting those disaster funds, and now they are subsidizing for a bit every farmer who takes an insurance. So we have to insure ourselves against weather disasters now. This is, for me, this is a symptom of society leaving farmers alone. Leaving all food security at their responsibility. And you should know there are only 23,000 farmers in Flanders left. 10 per week stop. 10 per week. We don't know the suicide numbers. In France, they do. And they are high. So this is on top of all what we heard today. This is what the farmers' reality is right now. So if you ask a farmer to mitigate climate, he's only his first. He's surviving the next day right now. So he's the climate change. He's adapting to climate change, and mitigating climate change is just a few levels higher. And if I can execute an agriculture that is mitigating climate change by capturing carbon, by stimulating biodiversity, it is only because I have a CSA. It's a community supporting me, and I can take risks, I can experiment, I can make extra costs, because I know people are going to buy my vegetables anyway. And that is my message, I think. If we want to change this, if we want to tackle this, we're going to have to do it together and can't leave farmers alone anymore. Food is something we all need, and we are, by accident, the ones producing it. But yeah.
And I'd like to add to that, like, I think how this was spinned afterwards in media. I think most of the farmers that I spoke with during these protests, they were asking for a system in which they were fairly compensated for what they do. And there was a big lobby effort also to make it seem as the only solution to do this was to do away with environmental measures that imposed them with costs and stuff like that. But it's complex, you know. Also, it's not also the farmers there was not one farmer. Like now it's the farmers against everyone, but there are farmers there with very different demands, but this demand of fair compensation got twisted in many, many ways. So it's a very interesting question, and I shall not speak any more on this. Go ahead.
I think suing a big company is maybe creating an awareness on the consumer side is also can be an advantage to the future, because buying local products and not using energy if you don't need the energy, like driving a car is sometimes unnecessary. But people are driving more case every year than ever before. There's also an opportunity for maybe another group to belangrijker om een grotere bereikbaarheid te creëren bij de consumenten. En Niet zozeer enkel om de grote beleid te gaan volgen.
So for the people who are not speaking Dutch, it's as important to raise awareness about a broad range of people, right? That's the line.
Yeah, I think that's what we try to do with the farm bill and with the help help of FIAN, because FIAN is really more specialized on these issues than human rights, for instance, but it's also to try to explain to the consumers and for the society that environment and agriculture are not conflicting, but that they are going, states are going together, and that we need to identify the real responsible for the crisis, and that's not the environment, that's deliberate decided 50 years ago to go on business as usual, even though they knew that the situation that we are in now. So that was also the idea.
Yeah. If I can add, I think reducing your own carbon footprint is super important. But it's not gonna bring the change we need in time. So, you know, this is critical decade. You know, we have to like halve global emissions by 2030 if we want to have a chance of limiting global warming to 1.5 degrees, like the day after tomorrow. So even if we like all change our individual behavior, it's not going to be enough to reach that goal. So that's why we are all going after these big systemic players, and those are the ones that really have to change, and those are governments and these huge companies. I mean, they don't change, we all won't have a chance to reach it. So it is super important, and I think you're absolutely right. We have like little campaigns around it, but it's not going to be enough. Yeah.
The last thing like this, I think this is really important, and you're absolutely right. But we see that the right-wing politicians and people are capturing the fear of people about their existence because people are getting more and more bored. And what David says that right to do something for climate change is going to abolish people. People hear this and they are afraid, and the right wing capture this anger. And it's a matter also of climate justice, that it's not always the same people, always the poor people, the workers people. It's easy to blame them, to blame the farmers, to let them work, to change things. But actually, when you try to touch the people that really cause this and that make a lot of money because of this, I think it's a very important message. And it's an important message also to reclaim the people that now are in the hands of right-wing ideological people that say that it's all a scam to touch you, etc. This is also important.
Now, before I take your new question, I would like to tell the people in the room that it's 4:30,
Yeah.
and I heard that some of you have to leave. So now is the.
Thank you. Yeah, I want to ask about the role of the NGOs. In both cases, there are NGOs involved. In the farmers case, it's very interesting to see that one of the arguments is the damage of the work of the NGOs. Maybe you could stay a little bit more on it. And in the other case, it's not even very how much involved are they. And maybe if there's an involvement with students in a legal clinic, you said that you were out of the clinic, what's the role of the clinical law?
Now we tackle the question first with the role to the NGOs, and then we'll come back to you. Is that okay?
Do you want me to? Yes. So yes, it was important for us to mix two kind of litigation classification ones. One very individual way compensation, damage compensation type with you. To mix it with more collective action type, which is the reason why it was with the human rights movement with FIAN. And also what we didn't say that we didn't mention that the climate coalition is supporting the case. So they are not in the legal procedure, but they are supporting it and bringing a lot of consideration and help and support. So yes, the idea was to show that it was to bring collective interest and a collective dimension to the case, although it was the compensation damage type. And that's also why it's so important for us to have other times giving their voice in support of the field in order to build the social and also I think it's very also very important to see that there is a coalition really around the case between traditional historical NGOs that did not in the past always so often work together. And so that I think it's one of the value of the farm case to see Greenpeace, FIAN, human rights, climate coalitions with trade unions, with Amnesty, lots of NGOs finally working together on to tackle climate change. So I'm really happy with that, and for the moment it's working perfectly with very complementary approaches. So FIAN, of course, is more, as I said, on food security, farmers' rights, and so on. Human rights, Ligue, not that expertise, but expertise in the strategic litigation on human rights. Greenpeace more on environmental issues. So it's really, I think it's really very precious to have all that different together on and to have a collective. And
in the legal clinics as well.
Legal clinic, but maybe
Would you like to answer the NGO alliance questions? Would you like to add something, or can Celine also tackle the question with regards to the legal?
Maybe on the damages, because you asked for the damages, actually the damages, well, legally, technically, they are linked to what's within their statutes. And I think that, well, of course, for Greenpeace and FIAN, it's more evident, I think, because we're talking about the farmer, about the environment, the human rights, it's broader, and then we are going to talk about the impact on society, on specific groups, and talk about like. Yeah, I think it's become clear that not only farmers are impacted, that older elderly people, that people with health issues, that poor people are more impacted than other people. And this is, of course, with the rights violations. I think when we look at, for example, the studies in Walloon, that it's very clear that the impact on the global population is really something should taken into account, and the link between human rights and climate change is something very important, because that also in the state, I Klimaatzaak is more clear because of course human rights, they have like a vertical working, so it's the states that have to make sure that human rights aren't violated. Here we are challenging a big corporation, but it's still important to explain that human rights are touched, even though, and that they still are responsible over their life still.
Maybe, yeah. So on the law clinic, so we have a code impact law clinic in Ligue, and it means there's that my students, my group are working on climate mission. And so we tackle questions, we try to answer questions raised by NGOs. So we do not do individual exercise, but we take questions raised by NGOs and we try to answer them with the students. And they make research on the question raised by the NGOs. And yeah, I must say, well, of course, it depends on the work of the students if it's an added value for the case. Often it is because students are highly motivated and they work hard to provide very useful input in the cases. But I would say also that it's added value for the students because it brings them deeper understanding of legal system, legal norms. And also it gives sense to the study because sometimes I think I perceive some kind of despair with our students, that they feel hopeless with the climate change issues. They feel condemned by the whole systems. And I think that with that kind of initiatives, for that ethical learning, service ethical learning, I wouldn't say that they find that hope, but they are active part of trying to build a solution to the problem. So, and last week we had a meeting and they told me, yeah, it gives sense to my master, and I really believe in it. And for me, it's really important to work a lot, to work hard on this case, and to bring some insight. There's another point that is really good in legal clinic, really interesting, is that it unleashes creativity. Law students are all too often we tend to teach law as an obstacle to creativity and to experimentation and innovation, social innovation. And in the law clinic, what we ask is, okay, we say we have a very legal realism approach. A norm doesn't mean something. You can have a lot of interpretation of a norm. And what we are asking in the law clinic is to develop other interpretation, like greener interpretation, because that's the question raised by the NGO. And you unleash creativity, but you always have to be honest, and you have to say if it's not the majoritarian dominant interpretation of that norm, you have of course to say it because it doesn't have to believe it. But you can unleash creativity, and it works. You have students who come back to you and say, hey, but I have a super idea on that norm, we can interpret that way. And actually 40 years ago in the budget parliament, someone did that interpretation in the proposed parliament work. So I think it's the way of tackling despair and also to have a deeper understanding of legal systems and legal norms. Of course, you could say that it's, the critique is that it's not axiological neutral. So the critique would be that we do not respect neutral axiological neutrality. I always respond. I do agree. It's really important to have axiological neutrality in our courses, in our lessons when it's obligatory, compulsory for all students. You cannot do politics in a constitutional law class. But or you have to be transparent on what you are doing. But in order for that legally, students choose to go on in that program. So I think it's for me it's clear that we respect their axiological autonomy and that we choose that program consciously. They know that they are going to work with NGOs promoting human rights. So for me, this program is not actually a real program in that. But maybe you have that critique, but because it's a critique like it's a very French. The French legal board is really committed in appearance to axiological neutrality, which is maybe not the case of legal culture, but like it's completely impact. I understand like the one on axiological autonomy, but in that case, I think that
question about the damage and the remedy. You see, someone said that there is compensation effect, so related to the damage that's already occurred before climate change, midway, that. So, but in this way, can we consider if in this cases, in such cases, there are no permanent remedy which allows, for example, because we can assume that further damage will occur because in the next year or the next heat wave or something, this climate change to avoid. So yeah, so I would say that cannot say that we have to sue TotalEnergies every year. It's impossible. So is there any have you thought about some permanent solution? Because here it seems, yeah, it's good to have damage because already the farmers have also it's really very important question. But we can assume that would happen next year. But climate litigation takes so much money and time, and you cannot ask for damages every year or something, or you can, or not also. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think it's a fair question and we talked a lot about this. So of course we have looked at the damage and we asked for reparation according with the agreement. So we put actual amounts of euros on that, and then for the future we asked emission reductions. So that is very clear, and then we try to align with the IPCC program, and so everybody agrees that that's really supported by every scientist in order to serve conservative estimation on how much reduction that has to be. So we applied this on TotalEnergies, and so well, there was an issue of how much we have to reduce, so 45% for, and there was a differentiation between oil and gas because they have other impacts on climate change. So we asked to reduce by 45% for 2030, and I have to look at the numbers, but for 90% oil in 2050. So this is a very great amount for the future. And maybe actually what we can say is that the emissions are going to cause damage in the future, and the scientists say that the damages are going to be higher because we have been emitting since 1900s, and all of these emissions, they get more and more. It's like a blanket around the earth. So the more there is, the more damage there is going to be. So it's going to be more and more. So they have to stop now. Otherwise, even if you stop now, there are going to be damages in the future, and a lot of damages in the future. So well, there are scientific reasonings about everything. As first of all, it has to stop all the future explorations and new oil fields, etc. So all the investments in the future have to stop, and we have to ask emission reductions. And we asked also for a real transmitted plan, because they have a plan on their website. They are forced by a lot of states to have a plan, and since it's multinational, so they have to do this. But it's not realistic. It's not supported by science, and they also say, yes, we will do this, if the others agree to do it, but now, so we are talking about the 57 companies, so if one of them isn't going for real transition towards renewables, they are not going to do it as well, and that's what they also say, so we need some of them to be the first, and we hope that TotalEnergies is going to be the first, and it's going to stop every investment in fossil fuels and to go to renewables. So I think it's a really great answer to the future that.
But I think it hasn't been mentioned yet that you claim 1 cent per euro.
Yes.
Absolutely, that's what you.
No, okay, it's a real finish.
I didn't know, I thought it was.
It claims the whole damage, but it's worth mentioning that it's not going to stick. Yeah, it's going to donate it to a fund that helps agricultural projects.
Yeah.
Just to clarify, does it mean that these cases do not mean that in the future other farmers or any other victims from climate change can rely on these cases and say, oh, this is the case, we can say, but it will be every time, every year, waves, heat waves or something, but it seems every time you will have to prove again this causal link between, so there are no permanent solution about the damage, about the real damage.
If they would do what we asked, and if they would stop, then this would at least cause less climate change. And if they do it, well, the next one, they can only blame damages for the past and not for the future. But also, we think that this will put a lot of pressure on other companies, because they all like to brainwash and they all like their image, etc. So we think this will really change. And then also on the space, they can force companies to do this if the companies not suppose TotalEnergies gets condemned and they do this. Then the Belgian state cannot say, oh no, we don't have impact for the small, we cannot say TotalEnergies really everything. So we think that the impact will really would be potentially very big.
Maybe a nice side effect of the new legislation on disaster funds, that the insurance companies will sue Total for all their least. Let's go for it.
I think we just need one of these things, like open the door and create any government, and once it's there, and the company, they know that we cause billions and billions of euros in damages, and so they will have to adjust their policy because they risk getting for everything. And for example, in the States, there are a lot of states who are already suing companies for damages what they cause. So it's like once this ball is rolling, they will change because they risk and that puts pressure on them, even though as we say it's time consuming and energy and also money consuming, which is being the case, but anyhow it's good question.
That's a really short question, because I wonder, because you mentioned that there were a lot of scientific evidence that would be gathered, but I wonder really practically, how do you work with scientists that are doing the hard science part, and then you include it in the memorandum?
Yeah, that's a very good question. It goes back to the activity development trade. So in our cases, we use a lot of scientific data, and that's also cases that show that we really need research on those issues. Like precise credible research made by science because it's key when we really prove the causality or even the fault. We can say that TotalEnergies did now and did nothing, but it's because we have not made by historians that show that. So we are of course always using science. At the same time, we sometimes we do not want to involve too directly science because we want to preserve their independence and their because it's the credibility of their study. So we use science, but we do not comment study because it will not be helpful actually. But we do use a lot of science, and science is with us, so we do not have so much courage to find that.
There's a whole community of scientists that is actually trying to do climate contribution studies. So they, when there is a severe weather events, these way or something, they are going to try to explain that this is linked to climate change. If that is the case, because it's not always the case, sometimes there is just, it's another reason, or we cannot determine the cause, but these are all people that are really engaged in this, and so there's a lot of study that we use. So we can really say that science is not outside, because a lot of scientists say that do this electric type, they use their knowledge to make this done, they put them online so we can read them, they are peer reviewed, and so we can.
But at the same time, the scientific arguments are not always the best arguments. Let me say, those companies, they also have a lot of money to I wouldn't say to pay them because it wouldn't be nice for my country. They can have also studies that will go in their sense. And our colleagues, other NGOs, warned us about the fact that relying exclusively on science, it can be tricky because science can, for instance, one thing is that you will never find scientific letter. And they will say it's 100% sure that this event is caused by climate change. It is highly probable that it is. So you know you can always exploit those kinds of features of science. So one of the conclusions of those seminars that we had is that it's important to have also arguments that are not grounded on science but on principle, and that highlights. Previously, important, for instance, to have arguments on you may participate in the damage. You have to because without too much questions of science that and so on. But sometimes principles is what we need. Of course, we need expertise, but on the expertise side, sometimes can
on this point, I was wondering if, what are the arguments, the counter arguments, especially concerning the causal relationship? Because I'm wondering, in a way, we all participate in climate change, of course, not as much as turtle, but when is the cutoff point or it's addressed, or when do we participate too much and reliable, or if they have any other arguments?
Of course, the other argument is then that they would be carbon neutral by in a couple of years because they will do carbon capture. They pretend that the transition plan is super solid. So they, of course, they have that kind of argument, and we have to show the judges that those arguments do not work or are very and certain, for instance, that carbon capture solutions. We think no,
I don't know, causal linking particular, what do they say, like, can't prove that we did it or will we be part of it?
That's yeah. I will say that their point is so small that we cannot even be and that they do an effort. But what we of course Yeah, just specifically that didn't get their arguments yet, but one thing, for example, in the South case, is that they rely on science itself, and they ask scientists, probably they scientists to make report saying that even if Shell would reduce from 45% their emissions, it wouldn't change anything to climate change, because the place in the market would be taken like under, etc. So they developed also an explanation like this, that their impact, even if they do what they ask them, there is no impact because the system is disciplined, and of course we are going to do the carbon capture. So that's.
In the case, they will take a subtlety argument in pro rata and
Yes.
emissions versus effect. Are you doing something similar?
Yep. So yeah, there was like a report that estimates or that calculated how much impact every carbon making had on climate change, and that gave and that study, but it's already quite old, said that the impact in terms of energies was 0.8%. But actually, and this may seem little, and it is little, but actually in Belgian law, even if you cause a little part of the damage, you can still be liable. And you have the choice, of course, to take action against other responsible, against you, private car, etc. But so you have the choice to only target a small group.
And so we are like 0.8, but Belgium only is 0.3. It's only something for 0.3 government, so that's how we measure the negative frequency meter.
I'm sorry, we cannot take any more questions because the bell rang before. So I'm gonna wrap it up quickly. Thank you for the organization to have us. Thank you, Ligue, Sarah, Koen, and Celine for this debate. And if you want to support any of the cases, you've seen the website this entire 2-hour session. So you can find the links there if you want to support it. And I would like to thank you very much to all of you for coming here today, and enjoy the rest of the day.
Yeah.